Hello and welcome to the two-man power trip of wrestling. Your host, JP John Poz. With me today, a very special guest, former TWA owner and promoter, Mr. Joel Goodhart. Joel, welcome. How you doing?
How are you, sir? How you doing?
Good. What's going on in your world? What have you been up to?
Oh, you got about 2 hours? I got I got all kinds of stuff going on. Some that's wrestling related, some that's not wrestling related. So why don't you just ask away, and I'll be able to answer questions. Let's do it that
So,
way.
so you're still doing stuff in wrestling?
I am proposing to do something in wrestling. Okay.
Oh,
This is I'll kind of give you. You ready? I'll give you you can newsbreaker here. We're
yes.
going to have a show sometime next spring that I'm calling One and Done. All I know is in the last year or so, Ric Flair's had a retirement match, Sting's had a retirement match. Well, I'm going to have a retirement, whatever. It's not going to be a match, obviously. But we're looking at sometime spring of next year. It's going to be a Tri-State Wrestling Alliance reunion of sorts. There were a lot of people that were involved with me that, to be honest, are itching just to be seen one more time. And so this started, there was a fellow that was on one of your shows, Bay Ragney, who I think you know.
Yep.
Bay.
Yep.
Bay came up with an idea that at the 2300 arena where ECW wrestled, that there's banners hanging on up at the top. And a lot of the banners were the stars of the ECW, but everybody understands that ECW doesn't happen without five people. Okay? It was DC Drake, Larry Winters, Johnny Hotbody, Tony Stetson, and Joel Goodhart. And Bay started this promotion to get people to sign a petition to petition the 2300 arena to have our names eventually put up in a banner. Well, that's over 300 people have signed it so far. And that started the ball rolling. And then one time I was having a conversation with Bay, and I happened to kiddingly say, it'd be kind of neat if we got everybody together and did another show. Well, as it turned out, one of my stalwarts, Johnny Hotbody, was on Bay Ragney's show. Tony Stetson was on Bay Ragney's show. Last year, I was up to see DC Drake. DC was up in Rhode Island. He was being entered into the New England Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame. And I don't drive anymore, so I had a driver take me up for 5.5 hours, got up there in time for his event, watched him get inducted. He acknowledged me from the stage, and then I drove got ridden home 5.5 hours back home. So I did 11 hours in the car, but I wanted to go see DC anyway. DC's around. Then in watching Bay shows, Steve Druitt, who was my sound guy, who I now find out is a restaurant owner 5 miles from me, didn't even know it. He's itching to do something. And long story, one thing leads to the other. So I came up with the idea of doing a one and done. I'm not looking to start the TWA up again. I'm not looking to start a promotion and do once a month shows or once a quarter shows. I'm looking to do one more show, done. And my goal is to have 5 or 6 matches, depending upon what we wind up with. And those matches will be based from the local promotions today. And then I'm going to have in each corner one of my guys from the shows. So like DC Drake has had a health history. I have a health history. Johnny Body has had a health history. So rather than getting anybody in the ring I'll be 71 years old, the idea here is to get everybody that wants to itch for the good old days, that liked ECW, because quite frankly, Tod Gordon, who ran ECW, took that a lot further than I would have ever taken it. But all of that started because of TWA. And so we want to get the acknowledgement that we're due. And needless to say, when we start putting this together, we'll let you be involved. We'll let you know what's going on. And hopefully you can help us out a little bit. But that's the only thing I'm looking to do with wrestling. I had no intentions of doing anything until Bay Ragney started this whole promotion with the banner, and one thing's led to the other.
Sounds awesome. I love it. Good idea.
Yeah. And I'm not. It's funny. I know you contacted me. I'm not even sure where are you based out of.
Asbury Park, New Jersey.
Oh,
So not
Christ,
far
you're
from
right up the
Philly.
road. You're right up the
Yeah.
road. Well, you were home with my old buddy, Bam Bam Bigelow.
Yes.
Yep,
I
and
always say
Scotty.
that whenever I say Asbury Park, home of
That's
Bam
it.
Bam. Yep.
Scotty and I went back a long way. Scotty obviously will not be in attendance for obvious reasons. I will miss him. Maybe I can reach it. Are you familiar with his wife at all?
No. Nope.
Okay.
I wish I was. No.
I'm going to try to reach somebody. One of my stalwarts, Larry Winters, has since passed away, and I'm going to be in touch with his family. I'd like to have somebody from his family. They've all signed the petition, so I'm going to try to get them to be involved. So we're going to get as many people involved as we can. ECW has reunions all the time. Obviously, WWE has reunions all the time. WCW has reunions. NWA has reunions. TWA has not, and we're planning to have it.
I love it. Great idea for sure.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where, right, there would be no ECW without TWA, like you were saying at the top, right? I mean, there absolutely wouldn't exist.
Well, that, it's weird. I say this all the time. When I created the TWA, I took, for lack of a better term, the best of Memphis, the best of World Class, the best of Florida, the best of Pacific Northwest, the best of the independents. And to be honest, I didn't create anything. I stole everything. All right. All I did was kind of put it all together. And the Attitude Era started with TWA. I know that ECW likes to take that credit, but it started with us. But to be honest, it started before me. I mean, when I used to do Memphis trips all the time and go down to Memphis, Tennessee, and I used to love their style of their brand of wrestling. And then when I brought up Kevin Sullivan and he brought up Florida, and then when I brought up Eddie Gilbert, and when I brought up Cactus Jack, I mean, I can go on and on and on and bore you to death. What I will tell you is I didn't come up with a creative idea, except some of the neat matches that we did. We had an outside the battle royal, outside the cage battle royal, the first one to get into the cage. Everybody's aware that Philadelphia is the city of brotherly love. I created this match called City of Brotherly Hate, and that was with Tony Stetson and Johnny Hotbody. We had a last to bleed battle royal. So we had 20 guys who all started in a battle royal, and the only one left who didn't bleed was the winner. Okay, so we did some creative style matches. I had pins count anywhere in the building matches. Obviously, that wasn't new. I had a fan participation lumberjack match between Jerry Lawler and Terry Funk. And the 12 fans that were the lumberjacks were picked random. It was a total shoot. Picked the names out of a hat, had them sign the waivers, and we had them outside the ring. So we had some creative matches, but the style of what we had, I stole. I'm not going to lay claim to it, but I don't think ECW should lay claim to it either. They took it to another level. When I had one of my matches at Temple University when TWA first started, I had a match between Larry Winters and Johnny and DC Drake. And DC Drake was thrown off the second level onto the floor, onto a hard floor. There was no padding. There was not. Okay, well, we did that. I mean, ECW did it. Like I said, they did it to a different level. But we did it. We brought it to Philadelphia. And when we had our independent shows, and I'm sure you go to independent cards today,
yep,
we had up to 3,000 people at our shows.
Wow.
Okay, we had, I mean, if you look at some of the videos that are on YouTube, you can see a crowded auditorium. We had $35,000 gates back in the day in 88 and 89, which back then was real money.
Crazy. I mean, how are you guys getting all that many people in? I mean, today, I think some big companies would kill for that. That's
it. And I'll tell you what, we actually ran one night against the NWA, and we beat them. Okay, wow. We had the radio show in Philadelphia called Wrestling Radio, and so I had a following. I didn't have TV, but I had 29,000 listeners per quarter hour. There's something called a Q rating, and it showed that I had 29,000 listeners. And I always kid people: if all 29,000 listeners would have come to my show, I'd be selling out the old Spectrum. Okay, unfortunately, I had 3,000 people come to my show and I had 29,000 people listening to my show. It always bothered me. But then I suddenly realized very few people wanted to bring kids to my matches because our matches were violent. Okay, there's one match on YouTube, and again, I don't know if you've watched it. It was a match. It was a show called Autumn Armageddon '91, and in the show we had a match of DC Drake and Johnny Hotbody against the Blackhearts, who were out of Florida with Luna Vachon as their manager. That match, if you watch it today, I get tired of watching the violence in that match. And I'm watching it 35 years later. So definitely take a look at that and you'll see some of the style that we had with the TWA.
And it's funny, ECW a lot of times will take credit. So I love that you're saying, you take them. They always take credit, but they'll never say, "Oh, I stole this from Memphis, stole this from here."
Yeah. Well, you know what? I hear that Tod is God. Well, guess what? Tod's not God. He may think he is. Okay. I'm not God. Okay. So I don't know how he lays claim to it when he stole from us. Now, like I said, he took it to another level. I'll give him all the credit in the world. Now, it was interesting. When I got out of the sport, I got off the radio show January 18th of 1992. And until October of 2009, I did not watch a single wrestling card, wrestling match, didn't watch an ECW TV show, didn't watch WWF, NWA, I didn't watch any. I walked away until 2009 came along. And then one of the guys that worked for me was a guy by the name of Michael Bruno. And somehow or another, I'm in the financial services business, been doing it for 48 years. And somehow he found me. And he called me up out of nowhere, completely off guard. And anyway, he introduced himself. I remembered who he was. And he said to me, "I have an idea. I'm thinking of starting up a promotion again. Would you mind if I use the letters TWA?" And I said to him, "Look, it's been 20 some odd years. You know what? I can't. No, go ahead, go use it." Little did I know, he buried it. He put the TWA champion against the ECW champion. ECW won and TWA was gone. All right. So he did a couple shows. We had, when I retired, quote unquote retired, I had Buddy Landell as my champion. And Buddy then wrestled in 2009, Glenn Osborne, who came out of my wrestling school, Ringmasters Wrestling School, and he won the belt. And then it was Glenn Osborne who then lost the belt to ECWA, and ECWA ran with it. But so that's why I can start it up again, because nobody else did.
When you look at, just thinking about that school, I think Sandman sticks out the most, right? Like, just as far as maybe popularity throughout the years, he probably the most famous student.
Yeah, well, we had a number of them. Sandman was number one, no question. JT Smith was another one that did well in ECW. JT was out of my school. I had Glenn Osborne was out of my school. Bay Ragney, who you know, was out of my school. And again, I can go down the list. Ernie Ribeiro was out of my school. There was a number of them. The Ringmasters Wrestling School was run by, management was mine, but Larry Winters and Ron Shaw were my teachers. And we had Paul Horndorf there as a guest teacher. We had Buddy Landell there as a guest teacher. In fact, Bay Ragney will tell you a story that he got taught by Paul Horndorf and by Buddy Landell, because he couldn't flip. Okay. And one time Paul Horndorf put him aside and says, "You're too fat." Well, lo and behold, Chubby Dudley, Bay Ragney, Chubby Dudley made money because he was heavy. All right. So, you know, you don't have to be today. If you're not 6'5" and blonde hair and blue eyes, you can't make it. Back in the day, when one of my problems is I'm 6 foot tall. More times than not, I was an inch or two taller than some of my wrestlers.
Right. Yep.
Okay. And that doesn't mean you can't wrestle if you're 5'10", 5'11". All right. Now, I can show you a picture that I had a couple years ago of me and Ric Flair. And I'm taller than Ric Flair. Okay, now he's gotten a little shorter in the day, but bottom line is, you don't have to be Lex Luger, don't have to be Sting in order to make. Kevin Sullivan made money, and he was short. Okay. And I mean, I can go over the list and list and list. When I had Cactus Jack and Eddie Gilbert, and that's one of the feuds that kind of put me on the map, I was taller than both of them. Okay. Now, fortunately, they wore the boots, which made them a little taller. But, the business of wrestling has gone down the hill with the internet. And TV, I mean, it used to be back in the day when I was involved in wrestling, it was territories. Okay. Then now the territory is the world. I mean, it's international. So you can't, it's a different world today. You can never recreate what we had back in the day. I mean, it used to be, I told this story, Don Morocco, who was on one of the first shows I ever did independently of myself. Originally, I had done some shows with my former partner, Carmela, who's also doing a podcast. And anyway, one of the first shows I did on my own, Morocco was on the card. And one of the things I happened to talk to Morocco about, because he always told the story that he would go to a territory for 6 or 8 weeks and then move on to the next territory. And he was a baby face at one territory. And then when he went to the next one, he was a heel. And so he always claimed that he was keeping himself fresh because every 6 to 8 weeks he changed. And then he told me something which I thought was very interesting. The match that Morocco had against Jimmy Snuka, and everybody knows the match where Snuka jumps off the top of the cage at Madison Square Garden. That jump occurred after the match was over.
Yeah, Morocco had won, actually, yeah.
Okay, and Morocco won because he fell outside. But then that best move that people think is one of the best moves ever happened after the match. So the one thing Morocco used to tell me is the match doesn't matter. The match is part of it. It's what happens before the match, what happens after the match. Okay, what's the storyline? What's the heat? Yada, yada, yada. And that's the one lesson you learn. If you go look at that match, it happened after the match. Yep.
Very true.
Yep.
Learning from Dominic Morocco for sure. Now,
well, I learned from all of them. Trust me, I stole everything.
Now, I know you haven't paid too much attention to wrestling, but did you see Sandman back in the news? They did a Dark Side of the Ring documentary on the Sandman. Are you surprised that, like the popularity of Sandman throughout the years? I mean, we're 2024, we're still talking Sandman.
There were a couple reasons. First of all, I knew about that one because my name's mentioned in it. Yep. So if you watch it again, it's not by Sandman. Yeah. Okay. I think it was Peaches that actually mentioned it. I can swear to God, I never saw that side of Sandman. Okay, that certainly happened after me. Yep. When he was with me, I mean, he was a beach bum. We had him as a beach bum. Okay, and of course, it wasn't my idea, but he went on to make lots of money doing the gimmick the way he did it with the beer drinking, etc. And I will contend that Sandman is the one that created Stone Cold Steve Austin. Okay, because Austin stole the gimmick from Sandman. And Sandman started at Ringmasters Wrestling School. So there you go. Even though that wasn't our gimmick, if he didn't start with Ringmasters, he may never have created any of that. And all this may have gone for naught.
He's one of those guys that's just like, you never thought that would be like a gimmick that would get over. You know what I mean? He's drinking, he's smoking a cigarette, he's walking around with a cane. It's an interesting gimmick that got over.
Yeah, well, but again, it got over. But now, Stone Cold's not doing it anymore, but he took it to the next level. I mean, it's one thing leads to another, leads to the other. You never know what the wrestling fans are going to. I'm telling you, think about this one. The WWF was really run by Hulk Hogan, okay? And the NWA was run by Ric Flair. The NWA, if you like the bad guys, the heels, the NWA was the place you wanted to go. And then if you like the baby faces, the good guys, you went to see Hulk Hogan in the WWF, okay? The one thing is the WWF had very deep pockets. And I always talk about, I lost money. Tod Gordon lost money. Ted Turner lost money. The only one who's made money in wrestling is Vince McMahon. Seriously, everybody else, nobody made, even in my day, you had Dennis Caroluzzo in New Jersey with Larry Sharp, and they actually made some money. They do the small shows and they made a couple dollars. But if you wanted to do something along what I did or somewhat a lot bigger, you lost your shirt. Ted Turner lost millions. And eventually he sold out. So if Ted Turner couldn't make money, Joel Goodhart wasn't going to make it. Tod Gordon wasn't going to make it. Okay. Paul Heyman went to make it by just keep going and growing and growing, eventually gave in to WWF. Okay. But it's weird when you just asking that previous question. Sandman, when I saw the dark side of the ring, and I've seen a couple of the dark sides of the ring, but at least he gave me some, or at least Peaches gave me some credit that he started our school.
Yeah,
but I never saw that drug side of him ever.
What a transformation. The beach bum to the, crazy hardcore drug, drinking, smoking.
Well, it's a lifestyle. The lifestyle of wrestling is you're a gypsy. Okay. And you got to stay grounded, and it's hard. It's hard to stay grounded, but there are wrestlers that Abdul the Butcher stayed grounded. Okay. As crazy as he was in the ring, he was that normal outside of the ring. Okay. And I can go through one after the other. Cactus Jack, how he survived my TWA and then survived ECW and has survived the WWE, WWF, whatever you want to call them, is beyond me. Okay? But it just proves that you can do it without drugs. I didn't see him ever take drugs. Okay? And I don't think anybody's ever seen him take drugs. And he's a family man. All right? So, the bottom line is you don't have to go crazy, but the ECW, those guys partied every night. Now, I found about it after the fact because when they were partying, I knew nothing about it. I didn't even follow them. Okay? But now I'm hearing stories after stories after stories. So, again, getting back to, yes, Sandman was a created by Ringmasters Wrestling School. His name, Mr. Sandman, actually came off a billboard on I-95. I think there was a company that sold mattresses called the Sandman, and we took the name from that.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect. Yeah. How come Vince is the only one that can really make money, or was the only one that did make money? How does that work with the promoters?
Well, he was the first one that figured out he had to beat the territories. Okay, his father didn't want to touch the territories. A handshake. See, with it's interesting. Back in the day, a handshake was all you needed. I remember Bruno Sammartino telling me that he never once signed a contract with the McMahons. Okay, and he was a champ for how many years? He never signed a contract. Back in the day, that a handshake was all you needed. Credibility was it. Today, you need a contract. You need 16 attorneys. You need an agent. And God bless these guys. If you look at John Cena, look at Stone Cold, look at Undertaker, if you ever want to book any of these guys for an appearance, you got to go through 6 different agents to get to them. Okay, and they ask for the big money, and they're getting it. God bless them. More power to them. All right, but it's just there's a time and a place for everything. And back in the day, Vince was in the right place at the right time. His father built what he needed. Madison Square Garden worked in his favor, but he wrote the Rock and Wrestling Connection. He did it. Now, if you go back to some old videos from Memphis, Tennessee, there was rock and wrestling before Vince ever did it. Okay, Adrian Street did it. Jimmy Valiant did it. Jerry Lawler certainly did it. But he did it. Vince, you have to give him credit. As much as I don't like him, like he cares whether I like him or not. I met him one time for all of about 2 minutes. My birthday happens to be August 28th, and Hulk Hogan's is August 17th. Okay? So one time Hulk Hogan was having a birthday party up in New York. And I was invited up there because at the time, we had a wrestling store down here called the Squared Circle. And we were starting to sell WWF merchandise at the store. So we got phone calls, you need to come to the birthday party. I went up to New York. Carmella couldn't make it. I went up to New York and met Hulk Hogan and met Vince McMahon, like I said, for all of 2 seconds. But he put it together. And you got to give the guy credit. He became a billionaire. He did something right. Yep.
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And as much as I don't like his product, goes to show what kind of bad taste I have. Okay.
Right.
Okay. To me, if you ever gave me back in the day a Rock and Roll Express against the Midnight Express, if you ever gave me Dusty Rhodes versus Ric Flair, if you ever gave me the Road Warriors, oh my God, those shows were awesome. And I hated the WWF shows because they were all circus acts. Well, guess what? He knew what he was doing because every child that wants to go to a match has to take mom or dad with him. So he sold 2 tickets for every one that he needed to sell.
Yeah.
And he was pretty smart. He knew what he was doing.
And then the merch on top of it. Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. It all came down to dollars. Hulk Hogan was his meal ticket. Okay. And I remember when we had the store, we would buy Hulk Hogan posters to sell, $2, whatever it was. And by the time we got the posters, Vince had already sold everybody their posters. So we wound up beating all those posters. I mean, we sold some. The one thing that we did with the squared circles, we were showing videotapes. Back in the day, we didn't have high-def television. So we had a store, we had the TV running, a regular 13-inch color television, and we had tapes from Japan and Memphis, and we wound up having people sit outside our store and watch these videotapes. But we never figured out how to make money doing it. Okay, those tapes were all copyrighted, so it's not like we could have sold them and reproduced them. Back then, you couldn't reproduce and digitalize like you can do today. So no, we did a lot with the radio show. Okay, and to be honest, if we had another radio show today, it wouldn't work because everything right now, no matter what news we would broadcast on Saturday, everybody knew it by Friday because there's so many podcasts and so many shows and so many title changes now. We were able to play along, okay? And in hindsight, again, I would never do it again because it could never work again. As much as we would like it to, it just wouldn't work again.
When you look back, right, during that era in TWA, Buddy Landell, like you were saying, one of the best guys you had, was your champion at one point. Was that actually true? Was Buddy Rogers actually supposed to have a feud with Buddy Landell in TWA? Because that sounds fascinating.
Okay. All right. So you asked the question the wrong way.
Okay.
I had an opportunity of talking to Ric Flair, and we had a handshake agreement that he would come to work at one of my shows. The problem was by the time he was coming to the show, he already signed up with WCW or whoever. Okay. Then I had Buddy Landell working some of my shows. I have a match on YouTube of Buddy Landell against Austin Idol from our Philadelphia Civic Center. That was incredible. Incredible. So anyway, one day, Buddy Rogers happened to be very close friends with Carmella Panfill, who was my original partner on the radio show. Okay. So I had instant credibility with Buddy because of Carmella. Anyway, Buddy Rogers lived in South Jersey, okay, before he moved to Florida. And one of the things we had a conversation with, and I said to him, I want to try something. And I want you to be a guest referee at a show that I have in Pine Hill, New Jersey called Pine Hill Punishment. And I had a match of Dr. Death Steve Wayans against Bam Bam Bigelow with Buddy Rogers as the guest referee. And part of that was to run an angle. So after the match was over, Buddy Landell comes out and challenges Buddy Rogers to a nature of the Nature Boys. Okay, so the original idea was to have Buddy Landell against Buddy Rogers. Then, when I had the opportunity of getting Flair, I said, "Wait a minute! What's the better match will be Ric Flair against Buddy Landell because that would actually be a good match."
Yeah.
Okay. And the goal would be that Buddy Landell would win that match. Okay, the one thing you learn about Ric Flair and Buddy Landell is both of them could lose and win. Okay, so my original goal was to have Buddy Landell against Buddy Rogers. Then, against Nature Boy Ric Flair. Then, when Flair gets pinned by Buddy Landell, Nature Boy Buddy Rogers would come out and challenge him. Okay, and then Buddy Rogers would win. And the reason for that was Buddy Rogers had told me he wanted to wrestle in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. So he wanted to wrestle in 5 different decades. And that was the original game plan. And this show never happened. And then, of course, he died not too far thereafter.
Damn, what could have been? That's crazy to think.
Well, here's what's amazing to me. The main event that I was having on my card was Nature Boy Buddy Rogers against Buddy Landell. I was promoting that match, okay? That was a show that a week before the show, I did not have more than $1,000 in ticket sales.
Whoa.
That's why I went under. I couldn't have. That show was going to be ridiculous. I expected that to be a $50,000 or $60,000 game. And I think the proof in the pudding is most people were disappointed the Flair wasn't there. Okay? And only the hardcore marks, if you will, that understood the Buddy Rogers angle were going to be. Now, unless everybody bought tickets the night of the show, I was going to lose my shirt. And that's why the show never happened. It was actually my worst producing show in terms of ticket sales.
Wow. I guess maybe Buddy Rogers is a huge name and a legend, but obviously well past his prime, I guess.
Well, that's the problem. And everybody expected that if Buddy Rogers was going to win, he'd have to pin Buddy Landell. Well, he could never pin Buddy Landell unless Landell just laid down. All right, so it was one of those matches. It wasn't even going to be the main event on that show. I mean, as I was lining everything up, I had one of the matches I had with Dr. Death Steve Williams and Bam Bam Gordy, okay, against two fellas, Chris Benoit, and I had this whole match thing set up. That would have been my main event, and it wasn't going to happen. And I was worried that tickets weren't going on sale, and I just had no choice. Otherwise, I either had to have the show, and again, my problem was my shows were loaded. I was spending more on airfare than most promoters spend on talent. Okay? And again, that was my fault. Nobody forced me to do it. So I take all the blame. But if you want these shows, look, I'm on the air with you 30 some odd years after I was high, because I had shows that people were still talking about.
Yeah.
But that's also the reason why I'm not there anymore.
How come you wanted to load up the show so much? You just wanted to put on the best show possible?
Yep. Well, I wanted the quarterly shows to be my superstar shows. So I had 4 shows: Spring Spectacular, Summer Sizzler, Autumn Armageddon, and Spring Spectacular, I think, or one of the 4 I told you. Then I was going to have shows locally, okay, which I did. I started having shows locally. The problem was the big shows and the radio show, because I was still on WIP radio here in Philadelphia. And this is back when I went off the air in 92. They were charging me $750 per hour for Saturday morning. So I had $3,000 of rent just for the radio show. I was having trouble selling advertising. There was only a couple people that advertised, Tod Gordon being one of them. That's how Tod got to do what he did. I lost money every week based on the radio, but the radio was the reason I also sold the tickets. Now, when I had 2,900, 3,000 people at the building, and then one show I had 840. Well, with the match that I had with Cactus Jack and Eddie Gilbert, the 2 out of 3 fall match, I only had 840 people in attendance. It was in the summer. It was in Philadelphia. It was hot as hell. Okay. Well, once you have one show that draws 840 when you need 3,000, you can't recoup.
Right.
And that was the beginning of the end. I mean, in hindsight, it was the beginning of the end.
So much.
What was
almost like, yeah, but it's almost like the shows are too good. Sometimes you have too much talent on there, so you can't make money off of it. Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing if you listen to Ted Turner's story. He tells you that Dusty Rhodes wanted $500,000 a year, and Lex Luger wanted a 3-year contract. Money kills it. Okay. On the other hand, if you can get it, why shouldn't you get it? So I have no problem with the guys. When I had Jerry Lawler, I remember Jerry Lawler getting $750 a pay. Okay, from me. Well, back in the day, $750 was a lot of money. Well, I find out now I could have gotten him for $350. Okay. Well, he never said to me, I'm not going to take your $750. And that's just one guy. I'm just picking Jerry Lawler. One time I had a match. I had, I'll give you a better one. I had a match where I had the Black Hearts with Luna Vachon. All three had to be flown up from Florida. Okay. Now, they were certainly not prima donnas. Luna Vachon certainly was a name. The two guys under the hood, you didn't even know who the hell they were. Okay. Gangrel was one of them. And I know Gangrel well. Tom Nash was the other one, but nobody knew who it was. Okay. I would fly the three of them up. Unfortunately, I needed 2 hotel rooms. Luna was in 1 hotel room because she was the female and the 2 guys. Okay. So I had 2 hotel rooms, 3 flights, 3 pays, and they were only the tag team. They were only half of the show. Okay. And the other 2 guys that they wrestled were my local guys, and they got $75, $100, whatever it was. But they made the show. Okay. Then I had one match with Jimmy Valiant against Adrian Street. Okay. Because I wanted the match. I always wanted to see Adrian Street. I never got a chance to go down to Georgia to see him. Jimmy Valiant. Okay. We saw him at the Spectrum down here in Philadelphia, but they didn't know me. Jimmy Valiant wrote me up in his book. I'm by name, and even though he knows he misspelled my name, he called me Joe Goodhart instead of Joel. But I'm in his book. He loved the idea that he was on my show. Well, he was there. Adrian Street was there. Both those guys were well past their prime. They were the second match on my card. Now, with Adrian came Miss Linda. So that was 3 people: Jimmy Valiant, Adrian Street, and Miss Linda. 3 airfares for the second match on the card. All right. And I look back now, I used to have 6 main events. But that's why people still talk about my shows.
Loaded, yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
How did you book all those talents? Because, I mean, from Florida, from Memphis, I mean, they're coming in from all over the place. How do you actually, book those talents?
They wanted to be on. I'll tell you what happened. The magazines were based out of New York. Bill Apter and George Napolitano lived down near me. Bill Apter lives 10 minutes from me. Okay. These guys loved the idea that instead of them going down to Georgia to see Adrian Street, I'm bringing them up. So one of the things I said to Bob Smith used to sing ringside from Pro Wrestling Illustrated. He used to sit at my table. One of the things that I told these guys, when you put the pictures in your magazines, I just want you to give credit to the Tri-State Wrestling Alliance. I don't need Joel Goodhart. I don't give a damn. Tri-State Wrestling Alliance. And if you go back to those old magazines, man, TWA was all over the place. So one of the shows I did at Temple University, this is when we were first starting out, and I got a belt. So I had a commissioned belt, not this crap that you see these local independents run with today, where the damn thing, I'm talking about a legitimate belt. I had a belt made, and I made it, and this is on YouTube. You can look at it. I announced the belt from the ring, and I took the belt out of a bag, and I showed everybody the belt. When I came out of the ring, Bill Apter gives me a flag now. And he tells me as I walk down the steps of the ring, he says, I want you to know PWI is going to recognize the Tri-State Wrestling belt. What kind of credibility was that? I couldn't have gotten that without my cooperation from them, and me cooperating with them was a 2-way street. Okay. And so being from Philly, being that the magazines are all 90 miles away, they could come down. I gave them all the passes to the show. I didn't care. Let them come into the show. Just give me the TWA the credit. And we started working well with each other. I mean, I could have dealt with New Japan. So we had Owen Hart against one of the Japanese wrestlers. I was bringing people in from Japan. So these guys could get pictures in the ring. Okay. When Owen Hart worked for me, I mean, when did Owen Hart ever do an independent show? Think about this one. We had Curry Von Erich on one of my shows. If you know anything about Curry Von Erich, Curry was known as a no-show. Okay, he only accepts Texas. Well, I got him to come to my show because I had a great reputation. I paid well. To be honest, I overpaid. Okay, and they called me. I tell the story. I won't get into all the details without boring you. The Sheik called me. I didn't call the Sheik. I told Abdullah that I wanted a match between him and Sheik, and he gave a call to Sheik, and Sheik called me. I got a phone call one day. It was Sheik on the telephone telling me, okay, you want to book me. I mean, I had the Sheik call me. So, the magazines worked in my favor. My matches worked in the favor. When I had Jerry Lawler against Curry Von Erich, Jerry Lawler called the finish. He said to me, do you mind if I use fire? And I said, nobody's ever used fire in Philly that I'm aware of. Jerry Lawler threw fire in Curry Von Erich's face. Okay, and that's on YouTube, so you can see it. Well, Curry Von Erich and Jerry Lawler fought the night before at the Sportatorium in Dallas on a Friday night, and then came up for a Saturday afternoon show for me.
Awesome.
Okay, these guys worked. I worked miracles, but you want to know, it was a team effort. They worked for me. I overpaid. They came up. They did what I asked them to do. It's a two-way street. Now, was that my downfall? Yeah. No question. I'll admit it. But you want to know something? That was Ted Turner's downfall. It was Tod Gordon's downfall. We all had our stories.
It's just amazing if you look at the Sheik is coming in. I mean, geez, Lawler's coming up, Von Erich. It's amazing that it's the talent level.
Oh my God! Back in the day, we had the talent to do it with. Today, you couldn't do those shows. There's no equivalent talent. I mean, one time it wasn't a battle royal. I had everybody outside the ring. I had Terry Funk, Bam Bam Bigelow, Kevin Sullivan. I mean, I can go down this list. It's crazy. And I had all these guys. They were just doing when Kevin Sullivan, I had him wrestle with Fallen Angel outside the ring. And earlier in the card, I had my DC Drake with Woman. I'm the only promoter I'm aware of that had both Woman and Fallen Angel on the same card.
Yeah, pretty amazing if you really look at it. Jeez, yeah.
You had to be in the back to watch Woman, Nancy, doing her hair. Just to try to get her love for Fallen Angel was incredible. But that's, it's funny. I tell stories now. It's weird. If you can ask me a simple question and I can be on here for hours. And here I am on a Tuesday night talking to John Poz, who I've never met. Okay, I don't even know if it's John Poz or John Poz. Okay.
Poz, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't, but why are you talking to me? You're talking to me because of everything I did. Okay.
Right.
So I'm glad that I did what I did. I would never do it again. All right. I tell everybody this. When I got off the air, January 18th of 92, I had lost $168,000 in wrestling.
Wow.
Now, back then, $168,000 was ridiculous money. Okay. I lost $168,000. Yeah.
Wow,
the wrestlers made money, but hey, it's a memory.
Yeah, everybody but you.
Yep. It's a memory. No question.
Is there footage that you own, tape library that could be sold that you could make some money back for it?
The answer is yes. Okay. And right now I'm in the process of writing a book. Okay. Now I will be honest to tell you that I've been in the process of writing this book for 10 years. Okay. So there's two guys, Dan Murphy and Scott Teal, both wrestling oriented.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yep. Both of them are writing the book. Dan Murphy started the book out. Then Scott Teal picked up. In fact, I was communication with Scott today. We're probably a couple weeks away from finishing the book. Okay. Then eventually when the book gets done, I'm going to try to figure out who I want to write the forward. Then we're going to try to put the book out in time for this spring show. So it's going to take a year before we get the book done. And the premise behind the book is 10 matches that happened in the TWA, Sheik against Abdul the Butcher, Jerry Law, that kind of stuff. Then we also interviewed some of the referees that came out of Ringmaster Wrestling School. So we had Jim Molyneux, that came out of the school. We had Joe Zanoli come out of the school. We had John Finnegan, who worked with the TWA. He didn't come out of our school, but he's the one that taught Joe Zanoli and Jim Molyneux. So we're going to have conversations with the referees, and then conversation with some of the fans. Okay. And for all he knows, I might sell one book. Okay. It's going to be a book that I'm going to keep on my table, and I'm going to look at it over and over and over again. Because if nothing else, whenever I die, somebody's at least going to have a written history.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it.
I just don't plan on dying too soon.
Yeah, right. Hopefully not. Yeah. That tape library could be worth something, though, with all those names on there and everything else.
Right now, there's a fella that you may know, Ryan Kavanaugh. Do you know Ryan?
Sounds very familiar.
Okay.
Yeah,
Ryan runs that ECWA down in South Jersey.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So one day he actually called me up a while back, and he said to me, "Do you have a library of radio shows and film?" And I said, "Yeah, except they're in my garage. I haven't looked at it. Trust me." So anyway, he came by my house one day to pick up all my 2 boxes. He now digitalized about 50 of my wrestling radio tapes from the radio show. So I happen to be picking out one. It's not in any date order. So I picked out one. There's Kevin Sullivan on my radio show for an entire hour. Then I have another one where Tully Blanchard called in. He wasn't on the show. He just called in. Then another one, Jerry Lawler called in. I mean, I was making those guys mainstream. Okay. And what was happening was, like, when I booked Kevin Sullivan, I said, "Kevin, here's the deal. I'll pay you your rate, but I need you to do a half hour, an hour on my radio show. It's on Saturday mornings, blah, 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 blah." Well, I'm going through to catalog it. Some of these shows were pretty damn good, if I may say so myself. And I had no background in radio. Carmela, who was on me at the beginning, we had no background in radio whatsoever. We just happened to work out well. And when we did our radio show together, it was typical male, female. I was like the husband she always fought with, and she was like always the wife I always fought with. Okay. And it was a chemistry that just worked. Okay. And so we had, when we started with the Squared Circle, which was a wrestling store. Okay. And that's when Hulk Hogan was becoming popular and the WWF was starting to market. And then Carmella called in her friend. And her friend was Bruno Sammartino and Dominic Tanucci. And so we had Bruno Sammartino and Dominic Tanucci as our grand opening to do autographs. Okay. Oh. Then Dominic Tanucci says to Carmella and myself, "Did you guys ever think about having a wrestling show?" I said, "No, who the hell ever thought of that?" So we had a wrestling show at Neshaminy High School down here where the main event was Dominic Tanucci against Mighty Igor. Okay. Now, those guys were both past their prime, okay, but they were cheap. And as it turned out, on the card was one of Dominic Tanucci's students, Shane Douglas. Now, he wasn't Shane Douglas back at the time, but every time I see Shane, we talk about the fact that he was on the first show I ever promoted with Carmella. Yep. So, I mean, I could tell you, it's one thing led to another, led to this is all by accident. None of this was planned. God knows I wasn't planning on getting into the wrestling business. I could tell you that story too. None of that stuff. The school, the Ringmasters Wrestling School, the TWA, all of this was accident.
Seems like it all kind of lined up like dominoes, though, like a perfect lineup for you.
Yeah. I mean, it was just, in hindsight, we had a lot of luck, no question. When Carmella decided to back out and go raise her daughter full time. And I kind of ran with it at that point. But the reality is none of this starts without any of this stuff. I mean, you can look at the domino. I went on to heights that maybe Carmella wouldn't have gone to. I can't prove that because I certainly know that it wouldn't have started without Carmella. Okay, so I've been very fortunate in that my teaming up with Carmella and her husband, Paul, then getting hooked up with Dominic Tanucci and Bruno Sammartino. Then all these wrestlers all of a sudden found me. The reputation was that my checks cleared. And it's amazing what happens in our business if your checks clear. Right. Okay. So it's just one thing led to the other. And then I'm a promoter by nature. And so I just learned, I kept going further and further in keep thinking, looking for the big payday. Never happened. Okay, I had good paydays, but I would wind up spending it all. It was what it was. And in hindsight, I'm glad I did it. Don't ask me to do it again. I would never do it.
And if you look at it too, man, you are bringing in, so like you said, Bruno and Danucci, but Funk and Lawler are continuing their feud. It's like crazy. Gilbert and Funk have a huge feud there. I mean, did a lot of awesome, memorable stuff that just was great.
Plus, we had independents that needed to have the press. They needed to have a guy like me. Now, keep in mind, up near you, John Rezzi up in New York. All right, he never promoted shows, but he did the conventions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So he figured out a way to make it work for him in New York because he couldn't compete against Vince. Okay. I was a little far south that I thought I could compete against. Well, guess what? I was wrong. Okay. But there are promoters. If you go back 30 years, you can find promoters. You had the UWF that came into play. Okay. You got Northeast Championship Wrestling up in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. You have there's a lot of independent promoters, but the closer you are to Vince, you're only going to get killed. Look, even ECW had Paul Heyman, and Paul Heyman is now with Vince. And now he's in the Hall of Fame.
Did you know Paul at all?
Oh, yeah. Paul was on my first and second show when he was Paulie Dangerously. I did one show at Temple University where I had him managing Dr. Tom Pritchard. Okay. And then I had him on my first show. I actually had pictured this main event. Okay. I had Larry Zbyszko managed by Paulie Dangerously against David Sammartino managed by Bruno Sammartino. And I was hoping with my fingers crossed to get Bruno and Zbyszko in the ring at the same time. Didn't happen. But that main event now Paul Heyman is out in New York, so he just drove down. But Pritchard, who was not a name in Philadelphia, he flew in. Larry Zbyszko was out of Pittsburgh, but I believe at the time he was living in Florida. I might be wrong on that. And then Bruno. So I had people flying in all over the place. I had a main event. On that card, I also had Junkyard Dog against Paul Jones. Now, if you're a wrestling aficionado, those two used to rip up Puerto Rico. Well, by the time they did my shows, that wasn't going to happen. Okay. But I had Paul Jones, and Paul Jones was not a name that sold tickets. Junkyard Dog sold some tickets. But that was part of the problem. I was a mark first. Okay. I wanted the matches I wanted to see. And then, fortunately, we started building up some of the local talent where people started buying tickets to see Larry Winters and DC Drake. They bought tickets. Tony Stetson and Johnny Hotbody were both out of South Philadelphia. Everybody in South Philadelphia knew these two guys hated each other. That was a total work. Those guys were great. Total work. But the people wanted to see these guys kill each other, and they did. So, yeah, I mean, I can go on and on with this stuff. We built up the local talent, sold the tickets, but the main events sold the tickets. The people that were coming to my show at the Civic Center, the big shows, they were coming for the 6 main events. When they left, they realized the DC Drake, Larry Winters, Johnny Hotbody, and Tony Stetson were the stars of the show. But they weren't selling tickets because we didn't have TV to get that character built up.
Yep. True.
Yep.
What do you think is the
legacy? Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, what do you think of legacy at TWA, like when you really look at it?
I think the legacy is if you're in the business, the TWA is where it all started. If you're Johnny come lately, they don't know who TWA is. And again, that's partly my fault. I'm a promoter, but I just right now I'm fed up with all the plus that ECW is getting and all the press. When you watch the ECW show or at the beginning of the book, it talks about Joel Goodhart and how he bought us out and all this kind of stuff. it's time that we get the recognition that we deserve. And it's not me. Trust me. I mean, I wore a tuxedo and got in the ring with long hair. I mean, it was the guys that John. And again, I talk about all of them, but the Johnny Hotbody, the Tony Stetson, the Larry Winters, the DC Drake, they bled for the city. They bled for the Attitude Era. I just paid them. Okay, to use our term, I was a wallet. Okay, these guys bled for it. And I think back to stuff that they did. I mean, I couldn't get, well, first of all, today we couldn't do it anyway. But if those guys were in their heyday, today we could start a new promotion. Okay, we're just all old. You know, Larry Winters passed on. The other three are older. I'm the oldest of the bunch. Even Sandman. I mean, Sandman, it's interesting. I have left Sandman 5 or 6 messages in the last 2 weeks, and he's not calling me back. Now, he's not calling me back for one of 2 reasons. Either he changed his phone number and he's not getting the messages, or he's getting the messages and he's not returning my call for some reason. Okay? But I'm going to try to reach him. I'm going to try to reach him for the show that we're going to do next year, because he should be there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Has to
be, but he's not returning my call, so there has to be a reason. But we'll keep trying.
Yep. So as we hit the wind in here, we head towards the finish. What is next for you? I know we talked about it. You show coming up, possible book. Anything else wrestling related coming up down the pike?
That's it. The book, as I said, the show, one and done. That's really it. I mean, I'm going to be doing a lot of these podcasts to kind of keep everybody up to loop. And now I know that you're based in Jersey. I'll make sure you're a party to it.
All right. Awesome.
Yeah. And, and I know Carmela, my former partner, is doing her own podcast. And I was just on it this past week, and she's asked me to come back. Look, I got to get the word out. And I used to have the radio show. Now we got podcasts. Who the hell knew? So with the podcast, we'll get the word out, and hopefully we'll get enough. In fact, what I'm going to try to do is convince you to get a bus trip down. Okay? Because we used to do bus trips up to Bricktown, New Jersey. We used to do trips up to New Jersey and New York all the time. Try to get a bus trip down, and you can make a couple dollars doing it. Again, I'm not sure how many listeners you have, but we're going to try to get that thing coordinated. Big time.
Okay. Awesome.
All right. So we'll keep you in the loop.
Awesome. I love that. Now, where can everybody find you as far as social media and finding out more about what you got going on?
So far, the answer is nobody, nowhere. Okay. Now that's going to change. Okay. For now, I wish I could tell you I have a Facebook page, which I don't. I wish I could tell you. What I will tell you is I'll send you up Carmela's podcast. That way you can kind of keep in the loop with her. I appeared on a podcast in Canada, Cheap Heat. I don't know if you're aware of that one.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
But I was on that one a month or 2 ago. Bay Ragney, the best thing to do, if somebody wants to get a hold of me, get a hold of John. John will get a hold of Bay. Bay, you'll get a hold of me. Eventually, we're going to get something done here in terms of promotion for the book. We'll get the Facebook page. We'll get the social media. I'll get it up and running, but it's going to take some time.
All right. Sounds awesome. Joel, thank you so much for all the time today. Really appreciate it.
Not a problem, John. I appreciate it. Anytime you need me, you know where to find me.